What if I told you some of Hollywood's most famous names left behind million-dollar mansions nobody will touch, not even for a single dollar? From shadowy hillsides to crumbling estates once owned by music legends, these homes sit rotting in silence. Why would a celebrity mansion go empty for decades? Bad energy, buried secrets, or something worse? This is about far more than broken windows and overgrown lawns. It's about fame, fortune, and what's left when a loud life goes completely quiet. You won't believe who walked away. These are 23 abandoned celebrity mansions nobody will buy, even for $1. Number 23. Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds' Palm Beach estate was the kind of property that reflected the lifestyle of a major Hollywood star. Built in 1980 along the Intracoastal Waterway, the waterfront mansion offered expansive grounds, a swimming pool, manicured gardens, and open views across the water. The interior was equally lavish, with marble flooring, large entertaining areas, and ornate chandeliers that suited the glamorous gatherings Reynolds was known for hosting. Famous guests such as Tom Selleck and Sally Field were among the people associated with the actor's social circle. Reynolds had reached the height of his fame during the 1970s and 80s, and the Palm Beach property fit the image he had built for himself. It was a private retreat where he could entertain friends while enjoying the comfort and privacy that came with his success. The story changed as Reynolds' career slowed and financial problems began to mount. Legal disputes and difficulties in his personal life added further pressure, while the mansion itself became increasingly neglected. The gardens that had once been carefully maintained became overgrown, and the grand interior gradually lost its former shine. The property eventually reached such a poor condition that it was reportedly offered for only $1. Even at that price, however, potential buyers faced a major challenge. Restoring a huge waterfront mansion would require considerable money and work, while its connection to Reynolds' difficult later years added another concern. What remains today is a striking contrast to the glamorous home Reynolds once enjoyed. The estate still carries the scale of a celebrity mansion, but years of neglect have left it looking forgotten. Number 22. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson's former mansion in Southington was built in 1995 during the boxer's most successful years. The enormous estate reflected the wealth surrounding Tyson at the time, with an indoor swimming pool, a ballroom, elaborate marble features, crystal chandeliers, and even a private zoo containing exotic animals. The property represented a lifestyle far removed from ordinary homes. Large gates and lavish interiors reinforced Tyson's image as one of boxing's biggest stars, but his fortunes later took a sharp turn. Legal problems, financial losses, and personal struggles eventually left him unable to maintain the kind of lifestyle the mansion required. Following Tyson's financial collapse in the early 2000s, the estate began to deteriorate. Areas that had once been carefully maintained were left neglected, and the luxurious property gradually lost much of its former appearance. Its connection to Tyson's troubled years also contributed to stories and rumors surrounding the abandoned home. Despite reportedly being offered at a fraction of its earlier value, the mansion struggled to attract a buyer. Its enormous size, restoration costs, and complicated history made it a difficult property to take on. The home that once represented Tyson's success eventually became a symbol of how quickly that period of his life disappeared. Number 21. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's former Los Angeles home was closely connected to the martial artist's private life and training. Designed during the 1970s, the modern property featured open spaces and large windows overlooking the city. Its layout gave Lee room to practice martial arts while also providing a quiet place to focus on his physical training and personal philosophy. For Lee, training was a major part of everyday life, and the house became a private setting where he could work on his techniques and maintain the discipline that shaped his career. The property therefore became associated with the routines of a man who would later have a huge influence on martial arts and popular culture. Lee died in 1973, and the house later passed through different owners. As the decades went by, its condition declined, with neglect taking away much of the clean modern appearance it once had. Its connection to Lee's sudden death also helped fuel stories and speculation surrounding the property. Today, the aging home looks very different from the place Lee once knew. While his influence remains strong around the world, his former residence has struggled to preserve its own condition, leaving behind a fading piece of the martial arts legend's history. Number 20. Robin Williams' Villa of Smiles. Robin Williams built a place he called Villa Sorriso, meaning Villa of Smiles, and it sold for $7.5 million less than his asking price. Set on roughly 640 acres straddling Napa and Sonoma, the 20,000-square-foot estate had a private tower, a wine cellar, an 18-acre vineyard, and a stunning infinity pool. Williams built it in the early 2000s as his escape from Hollywood's noise. But by 2012, he cited a personal financial crunch as the reason he needed to sell, listing it for $35 million. 2 years later, he died, and the estate he'd been trying to sell sat unsold through his passing, price dropping again and again while grief and business collided in public view. It finally found a buyer in 2016, a French winemaking family who paid $18.1 million, nearly half of what Williams originally hoped for. A villa built for smiles ended up carrying one of the saddest real estate stories in recent memory. But financial strain wasn't the only reason a celebrity mansion could sit untouched for years. Sometimes it's the person's reputation itself that keeps buyers away. Number 19. Whitney Houston's Mendham Mansion. For 5 straight years, nobody would touch it. Whitney Houston's mansion in Mendham, New Jersey, languished on and off the market since 2009. The 13,600-square-foot castle-style home, known as Chapel Hill Manor, was built back in 1918 for a former Mendham mayor, and Houston bought it in the late 1980s. It's where she married Bobby Brown in 1992, and where their short-lived reality show was filmed years later. Grand staircases, a swimming pool, 2 jacuzzis, a soundproofed recording studio. On paper, it should have sold instantly. Instead, it sat on the market for half a decade, through Houston's very public struggles and right up until her death in 2012. Even after she passed, nobody would buy it for $1. An investment company eventually picked it up for under $1 million, and only later did a devoted fan, an emergency room doctor, purchase it for $1.5 million. He said the home reminded him of Houston's true heart. It took a genuine fan, not an investor, to finally bring life back to that house. Number 18. Evander Holyfield's 109-room mansion. Imagine a house so big it's practically its own zip code. Then it gets seized by the bank. Evander Holyfield's mansion sold at a foreclosure auction after the boxing legend fell more than $14 million behind on his debt. Sitting on 235 acres outside Atlanta, the 45,000-square-foot estate held a 2-lane bowling alley, an indoor swimming pool, a movie theater, and enough bedrooms to house a small hotel. Holyfield built it during his championship years as a monument to everything he'd earned in the ring. But after his boxing career wound down, the bills kept coming, and in 2013 the bank took the property and sold it for $7.5 million, a fraction of what it once cost to build. Here's the part that really shows how hard this house was to move. Even the bank struggled with it. The mansion failed to sell at its own foreclosure auction and had to go back on the market at an even lower price. Number 17. Sylvester Stallone's La Quinta Mansion. This mansion spent years waiting for someone willing to meet its price, but even Sylvester Stallone's name could not convince buyers. Stallone built the Mediterranean-style estate inside California's exclusive Madison Club in La Quinta as a private desert escape. The home stretched across roughly 20,000 square feet with panoramic mountain views, a private art studio, luxury spa facilities, and every feature expected from one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. In 2022, Stallone listed it for $22.5 million. Buyers admired it, but they stayed away. Months passed, the price fell, and the mansion continued sitting on the market without a deal. The asking price eventually dropped by several $1 million before billionaire musician Adele finally purchased the estate in 2023 for about $18 million, a discount of roughly $4.5 million. Even in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America, a celebrity name could not guarantee a quick sale. The longer the property remained available, the more it became a reminder that luxury homes can become financial burdens when the pool of buyers is incredibly small. For most people, owning a mansion like this sounds like a dream. Finding someone willing to pay for it proved far more difficult. Number 16. Bob and Dolores Hope's Toluca Lake Estate. It took nearly 6 years and a fight over the very soul of the neighborhood to sell this one. Bob Hope's estate in Toluca Lake sold for far below its initial asking price of $27.5 million. Built in 1939 and expanded over the decades, the 5.2-acre property held a 15,000-square-foot main house, indoor and outdoor pools, and even a small private golf course. Bob and Dolores Hope lived there together for over 6 decades until their deaths, and when their family finally listed it in 2013, buyers stayed away for years. Then things got complicated. A developer got the property into escrow and pulled permits to demolish the outbuildings, and preservationists and city officials rushed in to try to halt the demolition, sparking a citywide battle over whether the home deserved historic protection. The Hope family fought against that designation, worried it would scare off buyers even more. In the end, billionaire Ron Burkle bought the estate for $15 million, roughly half the original ask, promising to preserve it. And when it comes to legal fights over a legendary home, one Hollywood icon's house is caught in exactly that kind of battle right now. Number 15. Elizabeth Taylor's Bel Air bungalow? Elizabeth Taylor lived here for 30 years, and her own home still couldn't escape the wrecking ball. She bought the 7,000-square-foot Bel Air property in 1981 for $2 million from Nancy Sinatra, decorating her dressing room with embroidered silk wallpaper and building a trophy room for her Oscars. It was where she spent the last 3 decades of her life, quiet and mostly out of the spotlight. After her death in 2011, the house sold once, then sold again a decade later for $11 million, this time to a developer known for building massive spec mansions. And that developer had no interest in preserving Hollywood history. Reports made clear the house was destined for demolition, to be replaced by something bigger and more modern. Fans and preservation advocates protested, but with no legal landmark status protecting it, there was nothing anyone could do. One of Hollywood's most iconic actresses spent her final decades inside a modest ranch home, and within a decade of her passing, that home was gone. Modest houses like Taylor's rarely survive long after a legend dies. Number 14. Amy Winehouse's Camden Square house. 50 to 100 people came to view Amy Winehouse's house. Almost none of them were real buyers. The Camden Square property had remained empty since it was put up for sale, continuing to draw flocks of fans paying tribute to the singer rather than anyone willing to close a deal. Winehouse bought the 4-story London home with her father in 2010, just over a year before she died there in 2011 from alcohol poisoning. The house became an unofficial shrine almost overnight, with candles, flowers, and notes piling up outside. Her family said keeping it was too painful, and they explained it wasn't practical to keep it empty while paying the costs of its upkeep. But the normal real estate route completely failed. After months with no serious offers, the family gave up on traditional listing agents entirely and sent the house to auction instead, where it finally sold for under £2 million, well below the original ask. A house that should have moved fast, given its location and size, sat empty for the better part of a year because grief tourists kept showing up instead of buyers. Number 13. Liberace's Las Vegas mansion. This one dropped from $3.7 million to $500,000, and it took a bank foreclosure to get there. Liberace's former Las Vegas mansion was seized by J.P. Morgan Chase through foreclosure in 2010, years after the flamboyant pianist's death. Liberace lived in the nearly 15,000-square-foot home from 1974 until he passed in 1987, filling it with crystal chandeliers, a spiral staircase, and a bedroom mural nobody could forget. After his foundation sold the house in the late 80s, it changed hands a few more times, eventually landing with an owner who lost it to the bank during the housing crash. The bank listed it cash only, and even then, it sat. When it finally sold, the price was about $3 million less than what it had gone for just 7 years earlier. The buyer, fittingly, was a devoted fan from England who said it felt like destiny. Number 12. Kanye West's Malibu concrete shell. Kanye West didn't just fail to sell his beachfront mansion, he tore the inside out first. West bought the 4,000-square-foot Tadao Ando-designed home in Malibu in 2021 for $57.3 million. Ando is a Pritzker Prize-winning architect, and the house was considered a rare architectural treasure. Then West began stripping it down, planning a total redesign. Reports described how the house was controversially stripped down by West who removed the windows, doors, and interior finishes, leaving the concrete shell open to wind, rain, and salt air for close to 2 years. He eventually listed the gutted structure for $53 million, dropped the price, and sold it in 2024 for just $21 million, a $36 million loss. The new owner promised to restore it. Instead, the renovation stalled and the property slid toward foreclosure, with headlines describing bankruptcy delaying an auction of the cursed Malibu mansion years after the original sale. A house once celebrated as a masterpiece became a cautionary tale about how fast fame can wreck real value. But even a gutted concrete shell isn't as controversial as the next house on our list, where the fight isn't over money at all. Number 11. Marilyn Monroe's Brentwood Hacienda. This is the only home on our list where the buyers are the ones who can't get rid of it. New owners paid $8.35 million for Marilyn Monroe's final home in Brentwood, the only house she ever purchased for herself, and they wanted to knock it down to expand their property next door. City officials had other plans. The city moved to block demolition after the owners had sought to tear it down in September of 2024, and the city council voted unanimously to begin designating it a historic landmark. The owners sued, arguing the house had been renovated so heavily that nothing of Monroe's presence remained inside. A judge disagreed. A ruling denied the couple's request to demolish the home the city had declared a cultural landmark. So here you have a multi-million-dollar property that its actual legal owners are effectively forbidden from doing anything meaningful with, stuck as a museum piece they never wanted. Monroe died in that house in 1962, and more than 60 years later, it's still making headlines for the exact same reason. Nobody, not even the people who own it, gets to walk away clean. Number 10. Nicolas Cage's Haunted La Laurie Mansion. Nicolas Cage once called this house one of his worst investments, and given his track record, that's saying something. In 2007, Cage bought the La Laurie Mansion in New Orleans' French Quarter for around $3.5 million, a property with a genuinely dark history tied to 1830s socialite Delphine La Laurie, whose treatment of enslaved people in the home shocked the city so badly a mob nearly tore the place apart. Cage told David Letterman on television that the house was allegedly the most severely haunted in America. 2 years after buying it, Cage lost both his French Quarter and Garden District homes at a foreclosure auction, a stunning fall for a man who once owned 15 homes worldwide. An energy trader eventually bought the mansion for just over $2 million and described the Hollywood actor as having lost the property to foreclosure after struggling to maintain his sprawling portfolio. A house already famous for horror became even more infamous once a movie star lost it. Number 9. Toni Braxton's Georgia Estate. 6 Grammy wins, 40 million albums sold. And still, Toni Braxton's mansion went into foreclosure. In 2004, Braxton bought an 11,400 square foot home in Duluth, Georgia, inside the gated Sugarloaf Country Club community. 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a jacuzzi tub, a gourmet kitchen, and a private library. It became the backdrop for her reality show, the kind of house that looked like proof she'd made it. But behind the cameras, Braxton was drowning in debt. She filed for bankruptcy, listing something like $18 million owed against barely more than $1.5 million in assets. She fought hard to keep the house, telling the court she hoped to renegotiate her loan. The judge wasn't convinced, ruling that the mortgage company could move forward and take it. The mansion went back on the market for a little over $1 million, a shadow of what it once represented. This wasn't Braxton's only home lost that way either. Her houses in Nevada and Los Angeles had already slipped through her fingers, so how does a 6-time Grammy winner end up owing more than she owns? Number 8. 50 Cent's 12-year real estate nightmare. 52 rooms, 7 kitchens, a nightclub, and 12 straight years of failing to find a buyer. 50 Cent first listed the mansion for $18.7 million back in 2007, and nobody bid. The Farmington, Connecticut estate began life owned by Mike Tyson, who bought it in 1996 for around $3 million. 50 Cent purchased it from Tyson's ex-wife in 2003 for $4.1 million, then poured millions more into renovations, adding a grotto, an infinity pool, and yes, a private nightclub with stripper poles. It became a fixture on reality television, a symbol of hip-hop excess. But the mansion languished on and off the market for 12 years, especially rough during his highly publicized bankruptcy filing. Local real estate agents openly doubted he'd ever get his asking price. When it finally sold in 2019, it went for just $2.9 million, an 84% drop from the original ask. A mansion so oversized for its small Connecticut town that it became known as the most notorious house in the state. Two boxing champions and a rap superstar all struggled to unload homes tied to their own legends. Number 7. O.J. Simpson's Rockingham Estate. This house didn't just fail to sell. It got demolished on purpose, piece by piece, in front of television cameras. O.J. Simpson bought the 6,000-square-foot Brentwood estate in 1977 for $650,000, and it became the most photographed private home in America during the 1994 murder investigation and trial that followed. After Simpson defaulted on his mortgage in the wake of a massive civil judgment against him, investment banker Kenneth Abdallah bought the property in 1997 for close to $4 million. Abdallah had one plan from the start: erase it completely. In 1998, the estate was demolished after being bought by an investment banker who wanted to build a new mansion on the site, bulldozers tearing down walls while photographers documented every swing. Reports at the time confirmed the property was razed in 1998, with a new owner even changing the address to stop tourists from gawking. No buyer wanted to live inside that history, so the only real solution was to make the house disappear entirely. Sometimes a house is so infamous that demolition is the only thing anyone can agree on. Number 6. Mohammed Hadid's Starship Enterprise. This 30,000-square-foot Bel Air mansion never even got finished, and a court still ordered it destroyed. Real estate developer Mohammed Hadid, father of models Gigi and Bella, began building the mega mansion in 2014, but the city discovered he'd built it taller and larger than his permits allowed, adding an underground IMAX theater and extra floors nobody approved. Neighbors nicknamed it the Starship Enterprise and warned that the hillside couldn't safely support it. A judge agreed, ruling bluntly that if the house came down the hill, it would take a portion of the neighborhood with it. Court documents were even blunter, stating the structure posed a clear and present danger to Hadid's neighbors and thus had to be demolished. Hadid's company filed for bankruptcy. The half-built $50 million dream home was torn down to its concrete foundations, and what remained sold at a sealed bid auction with a starting price under $8 million, a fraction of what Hadid poured into it. A house so ambitious it violated building codes just by existing ended up selling as rubble. Yet even that story of legal defeat can't match the decade-long courtroom fight over the next mansion on our list, one waged by a tech legend who simply refused to lose. Number 5. Steve Jobs' Jackling House. Steve Jobs spent nearly a decade fighting in court just to be allowed to destroy his own house. In 1984, Jobs bought the historic Jackling House in Woodside, California, a 30-room Spanish colonial revival mansion built in 1925 for a copper mining magnate. Jobs lived there for about a decade before moving out, and after that, the Jackling House sat largely empty. And Jobs allowed it to fall into decay, with windows and doors left open to moisture and vandals for years. Jobs wanted it torn down to build something smaller and more modern, but local preservationists filed lawsuit after lawsuit to save the historic property, dragging the fight out for roughly 10 years. Records confirm the house had sat empty since around 2000 all the way through its eventual demolition. Jobs finally won the legal battle in 2010, and bulldozers arrived in February of 2011, just 8 months before he died of cancer. One of the most influential minds in modern technology couldn't sell, save, or even quietly remove an old house without a decade-long war. Real preservation battles like that one are rare. Number 4. Jane Mansfield's Pink Palace. Nobody could keep this house standing, not even the man who blessed it with a priest. In 1957, actress Jane Mansfield bought a 40-room Mediterranean mansion in Holmby Hills and painted practically everything inside pink, right down to a heart-shaped swimming pool and a fountain that spurted pink champagne. After Mansfield died in a car accident in 1967, the house passed through several owners, including singer Engelbert Humperdinck, who had it blessed by a Catholic priest to calm persistent rumors that Mansfield's ghost still walked the halls. None of that saved the house in the end. In 2002, the mansion was sold to a developer and torn down, erasing one of Hollywood's most flamboyant landmarks completely. The exact timeline is well documented too. Humperdinck sold the house to developers, and it was demolished in November of that year, despite objections from preservation groups who called it an irreplaceable piece of celebrity history. A house so distinctive it needed its own color name couldn't survive the very forces that made it famous in the first place. Number 3. Pablo Escobar's La Manuela. This mansion was blown open with explosives while its owner was still alive, and it's been a bombed-out ruin ever since. On the shores of Colombia's Peñol Guatapé Reservoir sits the skeleton of a house Pablo Escobar built as a birthday gift for his daughter, once covering 20 acres with imported trees, a private discotheque, and even a seaplane dock. In January of 1993, rival gunmen linked to a group called Los Pepes packed the ground floor with roughly 200 kilograms of explosives and detonated it, trying to kill Escobar. He wasn't home. The blast left the mansion roofless and gutted, and it's described plainly as the blown-open skeleton of a mansion that Pablo Escobar built as a birthday gift for his daughter, looted and colonized by jungle growth for over 30 years afterward. Even his broader estate followed the same doomed pattern, described elsewhere as having been turned into a cross between a cocaine palace and something out of a glamour magazine before falling to ruin. The Colombian government finally auctioned the wrecked property in early 2025, and even then, nobody knows what the anonymous buyer plans to do with a bombed shell of a house. Blood money built this house. Violence tore it apart, and it still wasn't the most infamous property Escobar ever owned. Number 2. Pablo Escobar's Hacienda Nápoles. This was once a 20-square-kilometer palace with its own zoo, its own airport, and life-sized concrete dinosaurs. And today, the actual mansion is just rubble. Pablo Escobar began building Hacienda Nápoles in the late 1970s, eventually spending an estimated $63 million on a compound that included artificial lakes, a private bull ring, and exotic animals smuggled in on cocaine planes. After Escobar was killed by police in 1993, the Colombian government confiscated the entire property, and it was abandoned after Escobar's death in 1993 and taken over by the government, left to decay for years while looters stripped anything of value. The main house itself never recovered. Photographers who documented the site noted it had reportedly collapsed in February of 2015, the roof finally giving out after decades of neglect. Parts of the wider grounds were eventually converted into a theme park, complete with water slides and the actual descendants of Escobar's illegally imported hippos, which now roam wild and uncontrolled through the Colombian countryside. But the mansion where Escobar once slept surrounded by armed guards is gone, a pile of collapsed stone nobody has rebuilt. Even a fortune built on an entire country's drug trade couldn't buy that house a second life. Number 1. Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. This is the mansion that started as a fantasy and ended as the hardest sell in celebrity real estate history. In 1988, Michael Jackson bought 2,700 acres near Santa Barbara for $19.5 million, transforming it into Neverland, complete with a private amusement park, a zoo, a train station, and its own fire department. For years, it symbolized the king of pop at his most imaginative. But after a molestation trial in 2005, Jackson left the property forever and never returned. Financial troubles forced him to hand over ownership to an investment firm in 2008, just a year before he died. What followed was one of the longest, strangest sales in real estate history. 5 years after it was listed for $100 million, renamed Sycamore Valley Ranch to distance it from Jackson's name, it finally sold in 2020 to billionaire Ron Burkle. The final number was staggering. Coverage of the sale described it as ending with a discount of $78 million off the original asking price, sold for just $22 million. A theme park built for a child's imagination became the most expensive lesson in how fast a fortune crumbles once the world turns away. 23 houses, 23 fortunes, and everyone proves the same thing. Fame builds a mansion fast, but it can't guarantee anyone will ever want to walk back through the front door. Which mansion would you actually want to own if every repair and expense were covered for free? Share your choice in the comments, leave a like, and subscribe for more amazing stories from around the world.